Hi everyone. I'm Roland Widstrom Jr. My presentation is on how hospitality law has evolved from medieval times to the modern era. We all believe that change is inevitable. Everything keeps on changing with time, including laws that govern human conduct. Hence, in my view, I think it is important to look at how hospitality law has changed over time. There is a great distinction between how hospitality law was imposed in medieval times and today. In medieval times, hospitality laws were imposed on hoteliers. The hoteliers were responsible for all the damages or losses. However, in the modern era, these laws have been modified. The modern hospitality laws don't spare the guests. The guests can be held responsible for the damages they cause. Therefore, under the current hospitality laws, both the hoteliers and guests can be liable for the damages depending on the circumstance. The innkeeper's liability rule is the earliest law on hotel liability, Sequest 5a. Innkeepers were responsible for the damage and losses of clients' property unless the harm was caused by an act of nature, third party, or the guests themselves. Hotels had to post conspicuous notices to alert guests on valuables worth that should be deposited in hotel safes to avoid losses. Alerting the guests was a precautionary measure taken by hoteliers because the law was against them. The legal concept that still governs cases on property damage is innkeeper's liability. Hoteliers must purchase innkeeper's insurance to cover any damages and losses that occur on the hotel premises and their assets. The coverage is a regulation specifically for businesses that offer lodging services. Through insurance, the risk of incurring losses through damage is minimized because the insurance will cater to all the damages. Under the common law, hotel keepers were responsible for all guests' property brought to the inn. They were required to guarantee the safety of the guests' property as per the law. For example, in the Crapo v. Rockwell case, guests placed all confidence in the landlords who offered overnight a break from their pilgrimage, case text ND. It seemed partial to impose unlimited liability on the innkeeper. Particularly, Michigan enacted legislation that started imposing a considerable risk to guests, Sandman and Washington Hospitality Association 53. Visitors would only recover a portion of their property, and statutes would only be applicable if a relationship existed between the innkeeper and the guest. The enactment of legislation was meant to protect the hoteliers from being responsible for all the damages. The move by Michigan to enact legislation that imposed liability on the guests depending on the circumstances is a good example of the amendment of the common law that imposed all the risks on hoteliers. The modern legal framework regarding liability for guests' property is based on Infra Hospitium, Sequest 878b. As long as an innkeeper-guest relationship exists, the former is liable for the latter's property loss or damages. The plaintiff must show that the innkeeper's negligence caused the injury or loss. Guests are advised to note the hotel's policy regarding property liability as laws vary from state to state and among organizations. The exposure to legal liability rule has a positive impact on the hotel industry. Legislatures considered the past common law unfair as some of the damages were caused by the guests. The law spared the guests even if they were responsible for the damages. The modifications of the common law reduced the burden on innkeepers while increasing guests' duty to care for their items during their hotel stay. This modification brought fairness in the application of the hospitality law. Generally, it should be noted that successful innkeepers' liability suits depend on the specific state laws. In conclusion, the hospitality laws placed all burden of loss on the hoteliers. According to the common law, hotel owners were responsible for all the damages that occurred within the hotel's premises. The hoteliers perceived these laws as discriminatory in nature. However, over the years, these laws were reviewed and modified to protect hoteliers from exploitation. Today, hospitality laws require innkeepers and guests to share the risk of loss depending on the circumstance. This implies that the guests can also be held responsible if the damages are caused by them. The following is a list of sources that I referenced in my work. Thank you for watching.